Hey guys, today I want to share some insights and some tips on how you can be more clear in spontaneous conversations. Prepared speech is relatively easy. All you need is time to get prepared. You need to structure your speech in advance. You need to practice it, you need to rehearse it, and then you need to learn to deliver it. Spontaneous conversations are more difficult, yet my ambition, and I'm sure many people share this ambition, especially non-native speakers, is to be clear and precise in spontaneous conversations with people. I want to be clear about what I'm communicating, and I want to be able to deliver it. If I need time to prepare it, write it down, practice it, rehearse it every time when I talk to people, we can't be talking about spontaneous speaking skills, and we can't be talking about confidence and clarity in everyday situations, because everyday situations are spontaneous. So here is what I have noticed as I was making videos for the community members and for the YouTube channel and for the course materials. I noticed that when I have to talk about something for the first time, it means I haven't taken the time to talk about it before, or I haven't given it enough thought. I noticed that the first time I talk about it and I record myself, I don't really like it. I mean, meaning, so many people will now say, I never like myself on camera. No, I meant to say that I never like how clear it is. And when I listen to what I said, when I listen to the recording, I hear things like repetitions. I repeat myself a lot. I walk in circles. As I was recording it, I already could feel that I'm drifting away. I'm going in an unknown direction. I'm not really sure myself where I'm going with this, and I don't know how to get myself back to it. Probably you can relate. I also noticed that I don't know what point I eventually want to make. So as I speak, I feel like I'm developing the idea, but I don't feel like I have the clarity about what idea it actually is. What is it that I want to communicate? Maybe you can relate to that. We feel this urge to talk about something that has a strong emotional response in us, and we feel like we need to respond. We feel like we need to talk about it, or we feel like we understand, when in reality, when we start talking about it, turns out that we don't really understand, because we can't express it. And we can't express it with clarity, precision, and confidence. We only feel it, but we don't have the capacity to express it yet. So what I noticed is that the first time I talk about it, it's not clear. I listened to the recording, and my first instinct was, oh my God, there's so much editing work ahead of me. And then I thought to myself, why edit? Why edit this unstructured flow of speech if what I need to do instead is I need to structure my thinking process, and I need to get clear with myself on what I actually want to communicate. So I thought, instead of editing a 14-minute speech that is not clear at all, it might be a lot more useful to spend 2 or 3 minutes thinking, like sitting down in silence and thinking about the things I actually want to say, thinking about all the mistakes, because trust me, I already knew all the mistakes I made. As I was listening to it, and even as I was saying it for the first time, I could already hear all those mistakes. I already knew what went wrong. So maybe it makes sense to spend 2 or 3 minutes thinking about my mistakes, thinking about the structure that I can deliver, and then recording it one more time. And you know what? It worked. The second time it was 10 minutes long. I managed to cut down on 4 minutes of irrelevant information. And because I myself was doing it for the second time, I myself was more confident about what I wanted to communicate. It sounded a lot better and clearer. One can argue if it really was spontaneous. I did it for the second time. My first practice attempt was, well, let's say it failed. But my second practice attempt was so much better. And I'm happy with the result. I think it's a good It's a good result, it's a good achievement, because it used to take me 45 attempts to achieve this level of clarity. I would be never happy with the second, the third, the fourth, and the 51st. And here I can see a noticeable improvement. So here is the tip, kind of the science behind it. Well, I already shared the tip, but I want to explain to you my thinking process. When we read something out loud, we are wired in such a way that when we read something out loud, we use this mechanism to make sense of the information we're looking at. We need to read it out loud to better understand what we're reading. Just like with reading out loud, when we say something out loud for the first time, meaning you either haven't spoken about it much, even though you might be very competent, but you just haven't had the chance to share it with other people, so you lack practice. If this is the case, or if you're tapping into questions that you haven't really explored before, such as, how do I really feel about the situation? Is this the right thing for me to do? How do I feel about this person? What are my values? Things like that. Or should we really close that deal? Is this the right partnership for us? These are new questions for you. You haven't thought about them much, and you haven't spoken about them either. So when you're talking about something for the first time, whatever the reason is, you're using the same mechanism. You're talking about it to make sense of what you're actually thinking about it. Absolutely the same mechanism. And maybe we're not supposed to be immediately clear on this. Just like when you read a new text out loud, let's say you read a novel by Virginia Woolf for the first time out loud, you will not make it right the first time you read it, even if you're a native speaker, because her paragraphs are long, her sentences are very long and complicated. And if you have never read any of her works before, it might be not easy to make sense of what she means. You might want to, or you might need to read it a few times until you get it, until you get it right. So here, the same thing. We're going through the same thing. We're saying it out loud to make sense of our own thinking process, and we can't know in advance what point we'll end up making. We can't know in advance what we're going to say last, because we're exploring. When people join writing courses, they usually struggle with structure. And the exercise I give them when they don't really know how to begin their text, how to start writing, and how to connect their fragments, I tell them, write the introduction, because that's usually the problem. Instead of structuring their text in advance, even though people have the time, instead of thinking about the big idea that you want to deliver, instead of thinking about the structure, the beginning, the middle, the end, the conclusion that you want to make, the lesson, the takeaway for your reader, people start writing an introduction. Sometimes a very long and a very messy introduction that doesn't lead us anywhere. But people need to write this introduction. First, I was very frustrated, and then I remembered myself in high school. When we needed to write, like the task was to write essays. We wrote a lot of essays. And sometimes we had to write an essay on a given topic after reading a certain book, let's say. And I would do the same thing. I would start writing with an introduction. And I remember this very clearly. Every time I was done with an introduction, I didn't really know what to do next. What should I write next? Because the introduction didn't lead me anywhere. I would start writing the introduction because that, for me, that was a method to tap into the topic. I would write the first thing that was on my mind without really asking myself where I'm going with this, or what's the point, or do I really need it? And every time I would feel stuck. Then I completely changed my methodology of writing essays. I completely reversed that. But because I could remember myself, I could understand those people who also feel the need to start with this introduction. So I tell people, if you don't know where to begin anywhere, write this introduction, but then delete it. Write it and delete it. So many people who are practicing to tell their story for a job interview, let's say, or who are practicing to tell their story to motivate their international team, or to tell the story of their company, or to pitch their company for the next investment round, they also start telling their story from an absolutely irrelevant and unnecessary introduction. Instead of jumping right into the story, they start with an introduction, a backstory, an introduction to that leads to the actual story. And we often don't need that first introduction that introduces the actual story. We just want the story. But people need this process because they're doing it for the first time. I was writing those essays for the first time. When people join writing courses, they join because they have little practice expressing their ideas in writing as well. They haven't written about the topic. I wouldn't say they haven't written much. They haven't written anything about the topic. They don't have the experience of expressing their ideas in writing. And very often we need to scratch the surface by maybe writing a whole page of irrelevant text. But by the time we're done with this page, we feel like we have accumulated the speed necessary to move on. And we finally understand how to approach the subject. It is an important process that we can't really eliminate. So my takeaway is that we need to let it happen. If you really need it, write this introduction and then delete it. And apply the same strategy to improving your spontaneous speaking skills. Say it one more time out loud, record yourself, and delete this recording. Or watch it and learn from it. Well, you're supposed to learn from it anyway. Make this first practice attempt, make it count, because it counts. But then don't use it, because you know that the second one is actually the one you need, and the first one is helping you figure out what it is that you want to deliver. If you know that this is just the first practice attempt that will help you make the second one, that will actually count, you will not stop yourself. You will not blame yourself. You will not judge yourself. You will just let yourself speak. You will let yourself repeat yourself if this is what happens. You will let yourself speak in fragments and run-on sentences. And come on, you're speaking in a foreign language. You are practicing expressing your ideas in a foreign language, and this is your first time doing this. There is no need to expect perfection from yourself. What it needs and what you need is courage. The courage to try, to talk about it. Record yourself. Let it all out. Don't worry about it being too long. And when you feel that that's it, you're done, stop the recording. Give yourself some time to process it. It can take from 15 minutes to a few days. But you will eventually understand what you actually wanted to say, and you will feel this urge, you will feel inspired to do it again, to say it again, and you will not feel this resistance to do it again, because now you know how to do it again correctly, what you actually wanted to communicate. Now you will have found the words to communicate it, and you will be inspired to do it again, because you know it's going to take less time and you're going to be more precise, and you will be able to communicate your message because you already did it once. All you need to do is just remove the clutter and do it one more time, and you will do it with way more confidence. It is not a 100% spontaneous speech, one might say. It's not an exercise to be 100% spontaneous, because when we're spontaneous, we should be raw. And only when you do it for the first time, it counts as spontaneous. One might say this, and on the one hand, I agree. On the other hand, I don't think we need to divide spontaneous and prepared speech this much. They are different skills. but one is helping us understand another, and one is helping us practice another. We do prepared speech exercises to get better at spontaneous speech, and we do spontaneous speaking exercises to get better at prepared speech. Why not? This is my approach, at least. So don't discard the prepared speaking exercises because they're not spontaneous. They're not supposed to be spontaneous. They are supposed to help you speak with more confidence, and they're supposed to help you deliver prepared content. But you can only be spontaneous after you have rehearsed enough. You can only improvise once you have learned the steps, once you have mastered the steps, once you can do them correctly. Imagine dancers. Dancers can only improvise when they know how to make all the steps 100% correctly. Only once they have practiced many, many times. Then they can dare to connect those steps in unusual combinations, and that is improvisation. If you're a beginner who happens to be on the dance floor for the first time, and you have no idea what the steps are, and of course you haven't mastered them, you haven't learned them, and you decide to improvise, then your dance is going to look like a chaotic movement, but not a dance. Well, this is what I wanted to share with you. Let me know if you want to try, or maybe if you tried to apply the tip, and what your strategies are to get better at spontaneous conversations.